right now. So we make sure we have a copy of this presentation. I see more people are trickling in. Welcome, everybody. Again, just checking in on my audio. Hopefully you can hear me properly for those who just joined. Just feel free to give me a thumbs up as a reaction to confirm that the sound is okay and that you can also see my screen. All right, I see more thumbs coming in. Amazing. Okay, so we can probably get started. I just want to be mindful of everybody's time and know it's still summer, and I would love for you to still enjoy the warm weather outside and being inside and attending a Zoom webinar. So, want to thank you so much for joining me today for the Back to School Summit. I believe this is our fourth annual Back to School Summit, which is very exciting. We're kicking things off with our Getting Started with SpacesEDU session. So basically, how to set up your first class for success from day one. My name is Tatiana. I'm the Education Services Manager here at SpacesEDU, and I have my colleague Victoria joining us as well, who will be monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions, she will let me know, and we can make sure they are addressed live. But a little bit about myself before we get started. I was in higher education prior to joining my Blueprint or SpacesEDU. I was an academic advisor for York University for several years before joining the team here in within the EdTech enablement services type of world. I love helping educators like yourselves find the best ways to use Spaces EDU in your classrooms and essentially drive positive change for your students. A few housekeeping items here. First of all, we are definitely recording each session. So there are in total 5 sessions that we will be offering. We'll make sure you get a copy of those in the follow-up emails. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A box. We'll also use a chat for any discussions. And stick around after the session today. Once you close the Zoom, you will be prompted to complete a survey. We would love to hear how you felt about the session, share your thoughts, feedback, and what you'd like to see in the future as well. All right, the million-dollar question that I wanted to start with today is, have you used or do you currently use Spaces EDU in your classrooms? Feel free to drop a thumbs up, or you could put it in the chat just to expand on your answer, just to gauge how everyone in the room is or where they are at essentially in their Spaces EDU journey. So we'll pause for a moment here to gather some answers. Amazing. Pavindeep says, ever since it was launched. So that's been a really long time. That's awesome. You've probably seen the evolution since we launched Spaces EDU. Lots of new features have come out since then. Anyone else want to share? Feel free to drop that in the chat. But what I wanted to stress for today is that no matter where you are at in your Spaces EDU journey, you might learn something new today, or at least be reminded of what to do in September or the beginning of the school year as you're setting up your classes. So on the agenda, this is what we'll be covering: a brief intro to Spaces EDU. We will also dive into my own live demo class just to show you, how to navigate, understand more about the foundational features within the platform, and of course, cover the easy next steps to get you started today. We will save time for questions at the end, or if you have questions in the midst of the conversation or presentation, please feel free to let me know. Victoria will flag it to me if you have any questions. So really quickly, for those who are unfamiliar with Spaces EDU or still pretty brand new to the platform, I wanted to give you a brief introduction to what it is, and what it can do. What I like to say is that Spaces EDU is 3 tools in one. It's a communication, digital documentation, and proficiency-based assessment platform built to make student growth and competency development visible for everybody, meaning for teachers, students, and families. It is also available as an app which I highly recommend you download on your mobile devices, not just for yourselves, but for your students in the classroom, and also encourage families to download the app on their phones so they can be in the loop. So as for the learning objectives for today, at the end of the session, you will be able to confidently and successfully do the following 3 tasks in your SpacesEDU class. First, we'll be able to document student learning and growth visually over the school year. Secondly, you will be able to build strong connections by sharing updates and celebrating achievements with families and students. And then the third objective there is sort of a stepping stone towards assessment. So we'll take a look at how you can unlock assessment capabilities within SpacesEDU. This won't be our primary focus for this session, but my colleague Lisa will be leading a fantastic session on triangulation of assessment later this week, which I highly recommend you attend. And I'll share all those links with you at the end if you want to attend other sessions throughout the week. But that's essentially what we are aiming to cover for today, these 3 objectives. But before we dive into my class, my demo class, I wanted to give you an introduction to the learning environments that exist within SpacesEDU. So you have access to 3 different types of what we call spaces, which are learning environments. First, you have your class space, which is essentially your online classroom community. All educators have a class space by default, just by virtue of having a class in SpacesEDU. And I like to say that this is your starting point. So you'll start from the class space, and then you get to decide if you want to include additional learning environments within your SpacesEDU class. And the 2 different types available to you are the one-to-one space and the group space. The one-to-one space is more of a one-to-one personal environment between you and your students. You can also give families access to that space. It's intended to be used for assessment purposes, for sharing learning throughout the year. It's definitely more confidential than the class space. And then we have the group space, which is intended to be collaborative for pairs or groups of students. So you get to decide which students you want to group together in that space. But we're going to actually simplify these learning environments for you in a click of a button. So I'm going to do that right now. And we're only going to focus on the class space and the one-to-one space. So we're just going to pretend we didn't see the group space for today. We are primarily focusing on these 2 for now. So in either of these types of spaces, you and your students will have the opportunity to showcase student voice and choice, capturing learning experiences. And then eventually you'll be able to connect student work directly to curriculum goals and outcomes, really providing visibility and clarity to families. Okay, so let's take a look at how we can make this happen in SpacesEDU. Okay, so hopefully my screen is sharing my SpacesEDU account now. So when you log in for the first time in SpacesEDU, you will be taken to your classes dashboard, which is what we're looking at right now. Depending on your school or district, they might roster your class list into the platform for you, which is amazing. That means you won't have to manually create a class. It connects all your students automatically for you. If your classes are not ready yet, or the school or district doesn't offer that service, that's no problem. Or maybe you simply just want to explore the features before you do it in your actual class. You can create a class manually by clicking the Add a Class button in the bottom right corner. And over here, just simply modifying the settings and creating a class from there. But for the purpose of this session, we're going to take a look at my Room 26 crew class right here and walk you through the different components you need to be mindful of as you start your class this school year. So we will begin first in the class space. But before we get there, I do want to remind everybody that once you get into your class, it will not look as populated as mine because I have customized my spaces, my learning environments according to my own classroom needs, according to my teaching practice. So just bear that in mind. Um, I will be showing you how to do those customization shortly. So let's begin in the class space first, which is where we engage with the whole class with all the connected families as well. So really quickly to give you a rundown of how the space is structured. On the left-hand side, you have your class list. So this lists all your students that are connected to your class. At the top, you also have a dedicated section where you can include a description, which also means you can have attachments. So any resources can be included in that section. In fact, you can have up to 10 multimedia attachments. And then beyond that, in the middle of the page, there is a feed of all the posts that you're going to be sharing. So that gives you a history of any content that you've shared in the class space. Wanted to actually start at the very bottom here to give you a couple of examples of what type of content you can share with your class. So let's start with the most common one that we like to recommend, especially at the beginning of the year, is a welcome post to Spaces EDU. And in that post, you're essentially going to be presenting your expectations for the class, how you want to be using Spaces EDU, what families can do in the platform. You can even attach a newsletter. You can have an events calendar in there as well. So a great way to provide a bit of information to families as they get connected to the platform. One thing that we like to stress here is to have something posted in your class before you even invite families to your Spaces EDU class. Other examples include sharing photos from a school trip, which I know families love to see, especially if they can't be there physically with the kids on this school trip. You can ask students to also share what they loved about the trip in the comments section, which is what we did here. And families can also chime into the conversation and see what students enjoyed about the trip, what they learned, etc. We can also share resources with families and students. So if, for example, here we did a lesson on social and emotional learning. We talked about mental health and how we take care of ourselves. So here families have an understanding of how we're covering this in the classroom, what we might have talked about in class as well. And as the educator, I can attach resources that might help families continue those important conversations at home. And why not also have a discussion in the comment section, and families can see that and also engage as well. And then finally, my personal favorite is sharing what their kids are learning for that specific week. So you can give a great breakdown by subject area so families understand what the learning outcomes were for that week and then attach corresponding resources to expand their learning at home. And also, why not include some questions for reflection prompts that families can use as well, and home activities that they can support their kids with. Again, it's really nice to be able to have more conversations or just trigger some dialogues in the comment section as well with both families and students. Great visibility all around. So I wanted to show you here how you would be able to essentially create a first post. So this begins actually in your class. And while I'm here in the class space, I'll click on the plus create button right here and select post. And then what you're seeing here are the different post details you have access to that you can include here. The multimedia attachments that we touched on are included at the top, so you can probably do a voice message to welcome families and students. We can attach some resources, which is what I'm going to do right now in as a link. So why not get a getting started guide attached and maybe a video tutorial for families. And then add a description and a title. All right, so we're satisfied here with the content. It will automatically select the space for us. And then as for the student dropdown here, it does select all your students in the class, which is amazing. If we want future students to have access to a history of all the posts within the class space, what we might want to do is just check this off to include all future students. That way, when they connect for the first time, they'll have that history of posts. And from there, we'll hit post to share that information. So if I want to go to the top here, we'll see the brand new posts that I just shared in the class space. Go to pause here in case there are any questions about the post creation process. Okay, amazing. So again, a quick reminder to have a post, at least one post visible in the class space so that families, when they get connected, they have something to look at and interact with. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to share here was the one-to-one space, which is where we can get a bit more personal with sharing student learning and also eventually assess our students. We're going to hit this back arrow to go back to the main spaces tab. And I've provided you with a couple of examples here just as inspiration for the types of one-to-one spaces that you can create. So we have here what we call a learning space. The learning space is just a catch-all of all the learning that happens throughout the year for my students. I also have another space for one specific student, which is here, Maylin. Maylin is on an ILP or IPP. And so what I wanted to do is just create a separate space for Maylin so that both her, myself, and her EA could just follow along and document her learning and growth throughout the year. But in terms of other examples, you would probably use these one-to-one spaces, you could create one for specific subject areas, for specific units, or even for dedicated space for reflections, goal settings, etc. So just a few examples there. Let me just jump right into the learning space here. Again, to walk you through a couple of examples. So as you can see, the structure is similar to the previous space that we looked at. We have our list of students on the left-hand side. So this tells me that I've created this space for these students that we see here. So as the educator, I can navigate from student to student, so I can take a peek at what's going on in Maylin's one-to-one space. I can also go to Nia's just to see what's happening. But on the flip side, if I was a student, I would only have access to my own one-to-one space, which differentiates the one-to-one to the class space, making it more personal. In terms of what can be shared in here, of course, we can ask students to share their learning throughout maybe a specific unit. Here we have an example of an ELA unit. We're studying what's it called? Percy and forget the name of the book, but we're studying a specific book here, and we're doing different types of activities throughout that unit. And I wanted my students to share what they're creating and what they're learning, and at the same time, that allowed me to assess them in SpacesEDU, which you would be able to see here at the bottom of the post. I'm making those curriculum connections, and then once I review students' work, I can apply a proficiency level. And so that allows me to collect assessment data throughout the year. And at the same time, this allows me to have a documented feedback that I provide to my students. So if I need to go back and take a look at how they were progressing throughout the year, if they've applied my feedback, all of that is visible and accessible here in their one-to-one space. So the next post is on the same book, just different exercise, different activity. We saw just above that the student was proficient. Here we see that they were developing. So this was the first sort of exercise for that unit. So again, quickly we can see that there was a progression. There has been progress already. And the other great feature that we have available is our audio recording feature or video. So we can make learning more multimodal, especially if it's an oral storytelling unit. We can have our students practice telling their stories out loud and have those recordings and truly see the difference across those multiple tries throughout the year, which is awesome. And then the other thing I want to stress here is how amazing these one-to-one spaces are for language acquisition. So we can have students practice their reading and comprehension. We can record them reading a passage. We can record our conversations with students as we ask them comprehension questions. So they have those reading skills documented and their literacy also documented in SpacesEDU and see the whole growth from start to finish. And for this example, we can see that this is more teacher driven. So you can share the load between you and the student when it comes to documentation. All right. Are there any questions specifically tied to the one-to-one space that you might want me to clarify on? No. Okay. Awesome. So let's go back again to the main Spaces tab, because now that we've covered those learning environments and what you can actually share in them, what the purpose is of each one, the next logical step is to invite people to join our class. So in the People tab, we'll be taking first to the Students tab, which includes our list of students. If, again, your school or district has taken care of class rostering for you, your list will already be populated and perhaps even updated as we receive the data imports. Really quickly on the right-hand side, I wanted to highlight our QR codes, which is particularly useful for our young learners. So you can download QR codes and distribute them to your students so they can easily get started and logged into their SpacesEDU accounts. And the other thing I also wanted to call out is the fact that you will be added to your class as a student. That way you can experience the student platform and just test out different features and be able to also guide your students as they navigate their accounts for the first time. As for families, once your students are connected to the platform, you will be able to enter their family email just below their name. So if we put my email as an example, once we hit send invite, we will be able to send an invitation to families. One thing to note here is once they accept the invitation and are connected to the platform, the paper airplane will turn into a green check mark. So you can invite as up to 5 family members per student, which is awesome. So everybody can stay connected and in the loop throughout the year. And then finally, with teachers, this allows you to have co-teachers in your class. So if you need to collaborate with, you know, educational assistants, resource teachers, you can have them all come into the same class as you, and they'll have access to creating spaces, to creating posts, and then maybe eventually assessing students if that's part of their roles and responsibilities. And to add a teacher, it's pretty simple. You'll click on the invite teachers button here to get started, and then you would enter their emails one by one to invite them to the platform. And once they accept your invitation, they will be added to the list here. And you can have up to 19 teachers in the Spaces EDU class, so 20 in total, including yourself. I think I'm seeing
Yeah,
perhaps a question. Yes.
there is a question about if they can add EAs to their class as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So once you grab your EA's emails, you can just pop it in here into the teacher emails. Any other questions about the invitation process here or any other steps that we looked at today? Okay. All right. So perhaps there's one more.
One more question asking,
Mhm.
it just says, just wondering about confidentiality.
Yeah. Do you mind perhaps elaborating on which aspects of confidentiality you'd like us to answer or provide information about? I am happy to provide the privacy kit at the end and a link to our privacy center. It does go into more detail about our privacy and confidentiality rules. So I'm happy to provide that information with you in the follow-up email. Okay. If there are any other questions, please feel free to let me know. Um, okay, if I'm just gonna address the question that just came in. If EAs are invited, they can access to all the records. I am just worrying about it. Yes, so they will have access to basically your spaces that you creating a post, and an assessment data that you have in the platform. As for things like messages, if you send messages to families or students, EAs don't have access to that. They will have access to their own messages. So it does require a conversation between all educators in the platform, just in terms of like usability and responsibility when it comes to Spaces EDU usage. Um, yeah, so if you're worried about access to records and whatnot, definitely have that conversation at the beginning of the year. In terms of sharing photos, we at SpacesEDU don't share any of the content externally. We don't try to send you promotional material, anything like that. We do recommend just also providing information about good practice or best practices with families as well, in terms of, photos and just general good practice. We do have a Spaces EDU slides that I can provide, just goes over all of those things and have good digital, citizenship and hygiene when it comes to usage, on like online usage. So I'm happy to include that as well in my follow-up email. Those are all really, really important questions to think about as you implement an ed tech tool in the classroom. Thank you so much for all your questions, everybody. So I just wanted to sort of conclude here by showing you how to unlock those assessment capabilities before we wrap things up here. So I'm going to head into my assessment tab, and basically, what we want to do now to unlock those assessment capabilities is to load what we call curriculum tag sets. And curriculum tag sets are curriculum standards or learning outcomes that are pulled from your own statewide or provincial-wide curriculum. And we make sure that you're able to make those curriculum connections and assess them as well. So to add those tags, you will click on the Manage Tag Set button here, and then you'll see that I've added two tag sets myself, one being the core competencies in BC, and then the other is a grade 5 ELA curriculum tag set. If I want to add more, I will click on the button right here, which will then allow me to do a search by province or state. I can do a search by school if your school has customized uh, curriculum tags. And then if I head into British Columbia here as an example, and then into math, I can select the grade level that I teach, like so, and then it will allow me to add that set. And so I will be repeating those same steps for all subject areas that I would love to assess in the platform that I'm perhaps teaching and will be documenting. So just to repeat those steps really quickly for you, you will click on the Add Curriculum Tag Sets button here. Then in the state province, you'll click on British Columbia or whatever province or state that you're from, and then selecting the subject area and then the corresponding grade level. From there, the blue button will appear in the top right, allowing you to click that and officially add it to your class. So this is going to unlock those assessment capabilities for you. Once you have those curriculum tag sets, it does allow you to start assessing right away. So if I go into any of my spaces, for example, specifically in a one-to-one space, just so I make sure it's confidential, um, and only visible to my families and the student, I will locate a post. Let's say that I want to assess this one. It has already been assessed, but I may want to add more tags as an example. I will click on this curriculum tag icon in the bottom left. Once the dialog opens, it will ask me to select some curriculum tags from my list. So I can select a couple more. And it gives me the option to also assess if I want to. So I can select those proficiencies here on the scale. And then once I click this blue check mark, it will register the proficiencies for me. And as I assess in the platform, it does get populated in this panel right here. So I can see the number of curriculum tags that I've used, what was their most recent proficiency that I've applied as well. So my colleague Lisa will go into more detail as to what the other assessment tools are in the platform, what you have access to, and specifically how you can triangulate assessment in your Spaces EDU class, which will be a really interesting session for you to attend. But the main um, the important tasks here that you have to complete for sure as you are setting up your Spaces EDU account is to configure your class space, adding a post to that so you're engaging families right away, and then creating a one-to-one space where students and yourselves will have a dedicated space to document learning, and then inviting more people to join your class in the People tab, specifically families or maybe even co-teachers in there. Any questions as we wrap things up here? Okay. So I give you some time to maybe think about your questions or type those into the Q&A box. Just wanted to briefly remind everybody that we are offering sessions now through Thursday. So there will be some sessions on family engagement, on triangulation of assessment, as I mentioned earlier, on how to build a district-wide portfolio culture with student ambassadors, so more student-led than teacher-led, and also another session on feedback and how to make that more effective and actionable within Spaces EDU. And I'm actually going to include the link here to the registration website in case you wanted to register for future sessions as well. Other than that, if you don't have any additional questions, please let me know otherwise, but we will have a survey at the very end once you exit the Zoom. So feel free to complete that for a chance to win a $25 gift card. I've also included the QR code here if you want to get started on that. If you have any questions that come to mind after the session, you can respond to the follow-up email, or you can also contact our support team at hello@spacesedu.com. I will stick around in case any other questions come up, but I do want to thank you so much for joining us today at the first Back to School Summit session to get started on your first class. Thank you so much again for joining. Really do appreciate you taking the time to spend with us, and we hope to see you very soon at the next session. Take care.